welcome to Books Alive. And I've been sitting here already having a fantastic discussion with a really, really special person. I am joined in the studio today by Dr. Mary Cleave, and she is one of America's female astronauts. Welcome, Mary, and thank you so much for being here.
It's nice to be here.
Great. Now, we just did an interview with Tanya Lee Stone, who wrote a book called Almost Astronauts, and that explained to people about the history of women trying to get into the space program and, you know, all the obstacles they were up against, from the astronaut, you know, kind of idea to the political forces that got up against us. And I thought, you know, women are in space. Let's go talk to somebody who made it. So thank you so much for being here today.
You're welcome.
And you've been up 2 times.
Yes.
You went up, what, in 1985 and again in 1989.
Correct.
And we were talking before we started the show about how you went to college, got your undergraduate degree in biology, then a master's in 1975 in microbial ecology, and then in 1979 went on to get a PhD in civil and environmental engineering. That was 1979. Sally Ride goes up in 1983. You go up in 1985. How did you get from graduating with your PhD to that space program?
Yeah, well, I actually, although I started flying when I was 14, and I'd always been very interested in aviation. However, when I graduated from undergraduate school, you had to be 5'2" to be an airline stewardess.
Oh.
And I was only 5'1", so I was too short to be an airline stewardess.
Did you consider being an airline stewardess?
That's what women did in aviation. There were no women commercial pilots. It didn't even occur to me, even though I had been flying since I was 14 years old, that I should want to be a pilot. That's just the way things were. You know, you have your conception about what you're supposed to do, and you don't question it. But I was too short.
Yeah.
So I, you know, moved on and went to graduate school. But I was always interested in aviation. You know, I was in the flying club at Colorado State, where I went to undergraduate school. And when I graduated from college with a master's degree, I got recruited into engineering. Again, that was part of affirmative action. They were looking for females that they thought.
So they came to you?
Yeah, and they offered me a graduate. I had to work in between my degrees. And I was working at an engineering lab, and I said, okay, after 2 years, I said, okay, I got my money, I want to go back to school, I'm going back up to the ecology center, and the engineers I was working with said, no, you want to be an engineer, and there's a lot of tension between scientists and engineers and how they approach problems.
Oh.
Engineers want the best solution for the time based on the data. Scientists want the truth. So there's this natural tension that goes on between the two communities because of the cultural differences in
Fascinating.
So anyway, they offered me this great research project on the Colorado River, and I sort of went. And the ones I was getting up at the ecology center weren't half as much fun. So okay, I'll be an engineer. When I was 2 years into that, NASA made the first call for scientists and engineers to go work in space on the space shuttle as mission specialists, which was like a new classification for astronauts. And one of the engineers I was working with in graduate school, he came up and he says, Mary, you're the only engineer working here that's nuts enough to want to do this. And he says, I saw this ad in the Logan post office. Go in there. It's right up next to the 10 most wanted.
Oh, no.
And so I went into the Logan.
In the post office?
Yeah. Well, you know, this is Logan, Utah, so it's, you know, and before the internet. I mean, so, you know, so I went in and there was this big poster from NASA right up next to the 10 most wanted FBI posters, and it said, NASA's looking for scientists and engineers to go work in space. And I went, ooh, this sounds like really fun, you know, because I didn't want to drive a desk. I knew that.
Oh, yeah.
And so I applied, and the first time around, you know, when Sally and Kathy Sullivan and Judy Resnick and everybody got in, the first 6 women, Shannon Lucid, I was still working on my PhD, and I got this nice postcard back saying, no thanks, you know, would you like to try again? We'll keep your application on file, and we'll let you know when we're selecting another class, and you can reapply. And so I sent back a letter saying, of course I want to do that. So I got this little postcard saying we're going to start another selection, you know, refresh your application, and I did that. At that point I had finished, and I needed to go get a job, but the timing was off. I didn't want to take a job for an engineering firm and then turn around 6 months later and say I'm not going to
finish out.
Yeah. After you've moved me to Pasadena, California, and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So I talked to, my major professor, and he said, stay here on a postdoc until you get this resolved. We'll give you a lighter load. You'll be able to work out. Because I had to get serious about getting in shape.
So did you have criteria that you knew you had to meet? I mean, did you have to be able to do 50 sit-ups in 10 minutes or anything like that?
They gave you no information.
Nothing. Okay, so you're sort of just throwing darts out there and thinking, all right, I probably need to be in better shape,
right.
or
Right.
So what did you do to get in shape?
Well, I was living in Cache Valley in Utah at 5,000 feet, and I used to run up and down the mountains to get into shape.
Oh, wow.
And that really got me in shape. When I got down there for the interview, I got in the treadmill, and the guys went, "Well, that was great when I finished," because I was at sea level in Houston. This is easy.
I'll bet that shocked the heck out of them.
Yeah.
That makes me think of the women that went in and applied, back in the 60s, and how they were blowing people away on these tests. I mean, doing better than the men had done in many regards, and still not being allowed in. And I think that's a great story, that because you trained so high up, you were like way overqualified for it. But
the physical stuff.
What were they looking for in a mission specialist?
They were looking for scientists and engineers to go work in space, and there are actually there are a couple tracks for mission specialists. There's one where you do the science, and there's the other when you do the sort of the flight engineering kind of stuff. And so they select people that have PhDs and have done research at universities. They're the track science, and then they select backseaters in the military that go through test pilot school, weapons officers and those kinds of things. Helicopter pilots. I flew with an Army helicopter pilot, Woody Spring, who was a mission specialist because he was a helicopter pilot. He wasn't a fighter pilot. That kind of stuff.
I do know.
Yeah. So so you had these two tracks. I ended up, for whatever reason, tracking over, and I was a flight engineer on the shuttle on my first flight. And then I deployed Magellan, which was a spacecraft. First time we deployed a planetary spacecraft out of the shuttle, that was my second flight. So
now, to deploy that, what did you have to do?
It took up the whole payload bay, and it was on a tilting platform, and so you have to raise it up, and then, when it's released, it comes right over the top of the
So you
cabin.
physically went in there and did this in the part of the space shuttle itself?
You're in the shuttle. On a deploy like that, you classically have two crew members that are responsible. One that does the hardware switches, and one that works the software, has a computer interface.
Oh,
so it's
okay.
Mark Lee and I. Mark Lee was a test pilot in the Air Force.
Did you go outside? Were you extravehicular?
Too small.
Okay.
What they did was, this changed when I got down there. Each spacesuit at that point in time was costing $1.25 million. I don't know what they are now. But they made a decision that they weren't going to suit the smallest guys. And I was in that group, which I was really upset about, because on my first flight we had 2 spacewalks. Jerry and Woody did 2 extravehicular, spacewalks, doing experiments for space station construction. And I was really upset when, I was too small to do it. But, this is what's really amazing, because you can't get angry about stuff like this. You got to roll with the punches, because all of a sudden they came and said, yeah, you can't get in a spacesuit, so you're going to be the flight engineer on the shuttle. Well, there was no way under normal circumstances. Here I am with Jerry, who was a flight test engineer on the B-1 bomber, and Woody Spring, who was a combat helicopter pilot in Vietnam. And there's no way I would have been the flight test engineer, except they could fit in the suit, and I couldn't. So here they had this bug smasher pilot as a flight engineer.
Cool.
But it was great. It's just great because of the training I got to do and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I was disappointed, but I got something that, in my mind, was even better.
Take us for a moment to the first time you went up in space, and you're sitting there on the launch pad, and we're sitting there watching, and you see all of that, thrust. I mean, all the flames come out, and all the smoke rises up, and it seems like the whole thing goes, and then it goes, woo!
Yeah.
How are you inside? What are you doing? Are you just sitting there like smashed against your chair? Is your heart pounding? Are you happy, excited? What was going on?
Well, I mean, it depends on what your role is.
Okay.
You know, because on my first flight, I was a flight test engineer. So you're sitting in between the commander and the pilot. So you're right there. And you got a ton of things that you're supposed to be watching and doing. And also, it's like flying an airplane. I mean, you have your bold face. You have your things that you need to know what to do, even if the whole world's coming apart around you. And so you're sort of reviewing those in your mind, making sure you're fresh. And then, so you're working so hard. I mean, I was working so hard my first flight, I didn't really feel anything, and I didn't realize this till my second flight, because I was just concentrating, you know, because you had to be ready in case you had to make the big split S back to the Cape or go land in Africa. I mean, there are all these milestones
Scenarios.
you meet
as
you go through a launch that you got to be ready to try to do.
So you weren't scared at all?
No.
No.
Well, yeah, I mean, people that have high anxiety, they're not going to apply for that job anyway.
I love it. I love it all.
I mean, that's my sister's a psychotherapist. She says, I got the anxiety genes for for you.
Oh, okay.
You know, and me.
She got all of that, and you get to go in space.
And
that's
I go in
cool.
space.
Yeah.
And so she but no, I mean, you really, you know, there are certain personality types that just don't, it's not going to be me. You know, it might be somebody else, but it's not going to be me.
So you're pretty grounded, so to speak, even though you're going up in space.
Right.
You know, I know that when you were on at least the second mission, you were doing some experiments out there in space. And I want to, since this is called Books Alive, I want to just briefly talk about a series of books. This is the Women, let me get this title right, Women's Adventures in Science. This isn't something that the library owns right now, but it is something that's out there that you can get. And if you are a young girl or you have a young girl and you're, you know, trying to encourage her or she seems interested in science, this is a fantastic series. And you were telling me that you're actually in another series of books.
Right. Yeah.
Do you know what the umbrella title is for that?
I'm not sure about the title. This was a while ago, but Muriel Schloss was the author of it, and it's not in print anymore, but it was a whole series of women in veterinary medicine or astronaut, and that kind of, and it focused on middle school girls.
Okay, and these I think are about 9 and up, but it's a series of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about 9, 10 books, and I'm going to hold this one back up again. This is Space Rocks, the story of planetary geologist Adriana Ocampo. And every one of these books is about a woman who has chosen to go into science in some way, just like Dr. Mary Cleave has. And it shows you all the wonderful opportunities that are out there. And, you know, a lot of times I think it's just hard for kids to find them. And so these books offer really great pathways. And I want to talk to you about what you did in space. We're going to take a short break. Okay. So stay with us. When we come back, we're going to talk about what she did while she was up there working with crystals and electrical storms and all kinds of cool things, and also what she was like as a girl growing up. We'll be right back.
Pants, pants, pants. I am folding the pants. The pants are long. Do they go on my head? Do they? Do the pants go on my head? No. They go on
Everyday moments can become teaching moments because learning starts long before school does. Give your child the start they need at bornlearning.org.
Big dreams and good grades aren't enough to get into college. There are actual steps you need to take. Finding someone who can help is the first and most important. For the next steps, go to knowhowtogo.org.
Anyway, welcome back. If you're just joining us, I'm here in the studio today with Dr. Mary Cleave, astronaut. She has gone up into space twice. And we were just starting to talk about what it was like for her when she actually went up into space. And I was sort of leading to what she did up there. Now, you were doing experiments on the second flight, right?
Well, I did some on the first flight,
Did
too.
you?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I grew crystals on both of my flights. And the
Why?
reason you want to go to space to grow crystals is there's no gravity.
Okay.
Well, there's very, 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 very little gravity where we are on orbit. And when you're here in this gravity gradient that we have on Earth and close to the planet, you don't understand what a huge force it is because you have always had it with you. I mean, about the closest you can get to no gravity is being weighted out, scuba diving, being weighted out so you're neutrally buoyant. And but then you have the friction of the water, so it's not really the same. It's a huge force. When you come back, you sort of feel like you should be looking like this, you know. So you go up there because without that force, things like crystals, like if you think of a snowflake, you know, they hit shear forces and they break, like in a big wind.
Okay.
Well, there's none of that, and so they just keep growing and growing and growing. So if you were growing a snowflake in a spacecraft, in a good, you know, tank setup where it wasn't hitting any shear forces, it would be
Why do you want to
infinitesimally
grow
big.
a crystal?
Well, in order to understand the structure of some things like medicines and how they actively work, you really need to understand their structure. And so getting a bigger piece of that structure can help you understand how medicines work or how, you know, any material will work, you know, whether it's if you're using it for construction, how
so it's
strong
just like
it'll be.
blowing it up to make a bigger picture of it
Yes.
so you can see all its little parts.
Correct.
Oh, how cool!
Yeah.
All right, so you did that. What else did you do?
We always have photography on board, and we work with earth scientists, and I'm interested in earth science, so I enjoyed working with them, taking pictures, you know, documenting things. We also were recording on my second flight. We did a lot of work on lightning because in the shuttle flights, a lot of times guys were saying, "Hey, you know, we're seeing the top of these thunderstorms. We're seeing colors." You know, everybody goes, "Yeah, right, right." But in reality, I mean, when you're on top of a thunderstorm, first of all, if you have a weather front like going across the United States, you can see it gets set off in one location, and it's almost like a zipper going right up across a continent. It just excites itself and runs along, and so. And on the top, you can see, you know, these big charges coming out, and sometimes they look like colors, you know. So we recorded those with a video camera, and we're working with guys, you know, to try to differentiate. And sure enough, now, I mean, it was just because we were at a vantage point where people had not been before, and so we were seeing things that, if you look, you know, theoretically into it, all of a sudden they go, "Oh yeah," but you know, it's like finding a needle in a haystack. You can sort of help them figure out where to go and what to look for.
What a pioneer you are. Do you feel like a pioneer?
I feel like a lucky person because I got to do what a lot of people would really like to do. But it, you know, looking at the Earth is just incredible because it's such a fragile, beautiful place. And, you know, all the test pilots I was flying with, a lot of whom had combat time in Vietnam, these people usually, for good reason, are not environmentally aware.
Yes.
And they all had this, you know, realization that the Earth is a beautiful, fragile place, and it was fun working through that with them. But they weren't seeing what I was seeing because I had been trained. I mean, they're looking, saying, you know, it's wonderful because we can't see any borders, and I'm looking down at Africa going, I can pick out the countries because of their different land use policies, or you can really pick out national parks because they're fenced. And you know, they're not allowed to let animals graze in there, and so there's these pockets of really lush, sort of green, like Mount Kilimanjaro. You can see it, the park border distinctly around it, you know, and that kind of stuff. So,
I told you I was going to ask you this question. When you were up there and you're looking out, you know, at what you can see, you know, because you're beyond the Earth's atmosphere, and you're looking back at Earth, did it change you at all as a person? When you came back, did you have sort of a revelation, or was there sort of a, you know, shift in values, or did it impact you at all as a person?
yeah, because what makes you understand is how small the Earth is, and it's, you know, because you're going around the Earth every hour and a half, you know, and you get on the treadmill and you run for 7.5 minutes. You go, okay, I ran across the United States today. So it really brings home how small our Earth is, and it also puts it in perspective. I mean, you bring the lights down in the shuttle and you look out, and you once your eyes dark adapt, I mean, you can just see. Well, it's like being on top of a mountain without any light pollution, only times 100, and because they're just stars everywhere. But you can see their colors.
Oh.
And you have to learn. If you're the flight engineer, part of the flight crew, you have to be able to identify stars, because if we do it just like the old seamen do it, in case things break down, you can still navigate off the stars.
Oh,
and so you have to be
great.
able to find them.
Okay.
And that kind of stuff.
Is it thick with light out there?
Depending on what part of the sky, but I mean, there's lots out there, and so it just makes you feel like.
Does it look like pinpoints of light, just like it does for us? Or does it?
Yeah, but they don't sparkle because they're not coming through the atmosphere as much.
Okay. Have you ever seen an asteroid or anything out there?
Yeah, people
fly by
things flying by. But you don't know if it's space junk.
Okay.
And you do have to move your spaceship so you don't run into things. I mean, this is not that unusual.
Huh. So there's a lot out there.
Yeah. I mean, the ground is what helps you with that. You're not up there going, I think I'm going to go because it's hypersonic.
Let's go left now.
Right. Yeah, you're going, 25 times the speed of sound. So you need to be way ahead of yourself.
Yeah. You just told me that you are 3 minutes younger.
Yeah.
Than you would have been if you had stayed on Earth, because time changes out there.
Yeah, when you speed up.
That's amazing. Yeah. That's amazing. And I read somewhere that you have flown 3.94 million miles. I mean, if you just think about the Earth and how far we can go here, that's incredible. That's just incredible. Mary,
they don't give us frequent flyer miles.
Yeah. Darn. They'd go out of business. Do you have a hero?
I have had lots of heroes in my life, and when I was a little girl, I thought Annie Oakley was really neat. And growing up, I thought Amelia Earhart was incredible.
What draws you to this?
I don't know.
Okay, it's just who you are.
Yeah, and and I had great parents in the sense that they had a very strange little girl. Because I was always playing with model airplanes and building model airplanes. My sisters played with dolls. I wasn't interested. My sisters in high school, junior high school, elementary school, all wanted to ride horses like good little girls did. I wanted to fly airplanes. And, my parents were supportive. I mean, they could have very easily been not supportive of this bizarre child they had, but they were great. It's like I want to take flying lessons. Well, if you earn half the money for the flying lessons, because I was a babysitter at that point, you babysit. If you can make half of it, we'll match you, and you can take your lesson. And so, and when I finished, my flying instructor, I didn't know this at the time, took my parents aside and said, she's very young, but she's did great. So this is not something I would discourage her from doing. He was an Army Air Corps pilot.
Wow.
One of the early guys that tested jets.
Yeah.
And, he was just this old guy.
Yeah.
And
with an open mind.
With an open mind. And so, my parents said, okay. And so he used to throw me in the back of he was a charter pilot. He used to throw me in the back of his Helio Courier and let me fly home, and that kind of stuff. So I got my flight time and my license for almost nothing. But he used to get a kick out of it because, I'd go in to have my logbook signed at a tower and stuff, and people were, I'd be there. I just sit on a tractor
down there.
Yeah, I just sit on a tractor seat in the Cessna 150, and he just got a kick out of blowing everybody's mind. We'd be on a radio flying in someplace, and they'd say, "Sweetheart, put your daddy in the mic," and I go, "There is no daddy." Yeah. And there was just silence.
Talk about working in a man's world. There's still only, I think, 25% of the astronauts are women in our program. How do you react if I say you've been living and working in a man's world?
Yeah, and I have trouble understanding that because I've literally always, because of my interest in science and math, and airplanes and engineering and that kind of stuff, I've literally always been operating in a man's world. So I mean, I react
Quote,
to guys.
unquote.
Guys yeah. to me is a general neutral term.
Yes.
I mean, it just is. And
yeah.
so
yeah.
I can't. I have no other way to compare it because I've always been like either the only girl or
Mary, did you ever get discouraged in all of this? Was there ever a point, you know, you said you got the postcard that said no, but you just kept on going, you persisted. Was there ever anything that you were put through in the preparation or anything where you were just like,
No.
No, I don't think you know
No.
that word, do you?
No.
It is in the dictionary. You'll have to check. Maybe your sister can explain it to you.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, everybody goes through this period of time when you're trying to decide to leave. I mean, any really heavy-duty career you've had, you know, and you're trying to decide, have I had enough of this? Is it time to do something else? And I do this a lot, because every 10 years, everybody has their natural periodicity for how they do things. About every 10 years, I got to do something totally different. I mean, and that's just the way, now I know that's the way I am, and I can sort of manage it better. But in the beginning, before I sort of realized I had this natural periodicity, you can imagine when I'm going, you know, this has been fun, but, you know, I think I want to go work on robotic spacecraft at Goddard Space Flight Center. And, then, you know, it's just sort of like people are going, what, are you nuts?
Yeah.
But it was, you know, I've been down there for 11 years, and my second flight, we deployed Magellan, which was a spacecraft that went to Venus. And if my parents hadn't been on the East Coast, I'd probably be out of JPL. But I went to Goddard, and it was, and I spent 10 years at Goddard and had a great time. And that actually, locally here, is a great resource if you're interested in trying to promote science and engineering interest in your kids. They, you know, if you watch in the paper, they have nights where they do astronomy nights with kids. They have model rocket launches for kids. You know, they have open houses.
I bet they've got a public information or public affairs or something.
They have a public affairs office, and they have a website. And you can get on it. And
do you know the website?
It's probably gsfc.nasa.gov would be my guess.
Okay, all right. Well, people here are real computer savvy. They'll hop on and find it, but it would be Goddard.
It's Goddard.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's
All
just
right.
down in Greenbelt. It's
Okay.
close.
Oh, that would be really.
And they have a good visitor center, too.
Okay, excellent, excellent. What an exciting life you've had. What are you doing now? I was reading something about you and climate change. Are you
Interested in climate change?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was working in earth science before I started working in the entire science program, but I'm interested in earth science and those issues, climate change, always have been. I mean, this is, you know, although I change, you know, you have your little themes that run through.
the common thread?
And for me, that's environmental issues.
Okay.
And I've always been interested in them, and I'm still interested in them. And right now, you know, either working with, you know, like Sigma Space, which is a small company that builds instruments, the kind of instruments we need to really get the measurements from space in order to improve the climate models that we need.
Aren't you looking at plant growth around the Earth, or was that something
That
you
was something
did
from
do?
Goddard.
Okay.
Yeah, when I left the astronaut corps to move up to Goddard, it was because there was this little project called SeaWiFS, which was a spacecraft that was going to measure all the plants in the ocean. Okay,
Oh.
and I went up as a deputy project manager, and then during the build, we were able to figure out a way to put a knee in the gain of the instrument so that we could, when you're flying over the ocean, it's like a black body, and you have to be really sensitive, and then you hit the land, and there's so much light reflecting over it, it's like a flash bulb going off in your eyes, and so you got to figure out how to do your instrument so it can do a dramatic change, you know, like clamp down, so, you know, squint, your eyes squint real fast, so you don't get blinded, and so we figured out how to do that, and so instead of just getting all the plants in the ocean, we got all the plants on the planet, which was great, because at that point we didn't know where most of the carbon was being absorbed out of the atmosphere, whether it was sequestered in the land, sequestered in the ocean, you know, and that for your carbon sink, that was a huge discussion. And then we had this spacecraft, and we measured it, and it was about 50-50.
Wow.
50% goes into the ocean, 50% goes into land.
Who would have thought?
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, it was fun.
Can people get in touch with you? Do you have an email address that people could reach you through, or do they need to read your book?
Well, I don't have a book. I mean, Muriel wrote the book.
Right.
The easiest way to get a hold, for anybody that wants to, you know, potentially talk to an astronaut or get an astronaut to come work with them, the easiest way to do that is to go through the Association of Space Explorers, which is a group in Houston that is the professional society for anybody that's flown in space. And so, and you can, that's available. They have a website,
Great.
Association of Space Explorers.
Okay.
And they can get on
Wonderful.
there, and they have everybody's biographies. They can find somebody, hone into whoever they want.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And Andy, who is the staff there, will help them.
Great. Thank you so much for
You're
coming.
welcome.
And thanks for being a female astronaut. I can see why you ended up there. You're just sort of indomitable, and you just have a wonderful spirit, and that's just great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Welcome.
I did bring some books in today that celebrate the 40th anniversary of the moon landing that is upcoming this year. This is Footprints on the Moon. That's a wonderful picture book. And this one is Moon Landing, that's a little bit more interactive. If you're interested, you know, if you've got one of those kids that likes something that pops out of the book, there's something like that. We've got some fun that you can have at the library. Here's Colin McNaughton with We're Off to Look for Aliens. And as Mary said when she saw this, you have to keep your sense of humor about all of this. Don't take it all too seriously. So, as always, we've got some books for girls on role models. We've got some books for everybody on the, you know, what we're doing out in space. And there's just so much out there for our young people now. So, as always, come see us at the library.